13th Inspector Ripley.
Yeah, 13.
Yeah.
I believe.
It's come a long way. So, do you want to get us started with it?
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for coming along. We've dashed the hardcore readership here. I do really appreciate people coming out. It's Sarah, it's slightly confusing because it's Sarah and Sarah, which is difficult to remember.
We answer to both.
It's my 13th book. The first only came out 10 years ago, so it's been quite a busy decade. I thought I'd kick things off with a short reading from this one, because everyone loves it. Everyone does love it. Tough because we didn't want to. And then we'll just have a few, because there's not very many people here, we can just do it very informally and have some questions and talk about my process and stuff, whatever you fancy really. But it's nice to set the tone. This is the book I'm supposed to be selling. So I always struggle when it comes to picking a passage from a book to read, because by the time I've written the book, edited the book, re-edited it, it's been through copy edits and proofreading and everything, I have no idea what's a spoiler. So I can pick what I think is a really nice bit of writing, and I'm reading it away, and suddenly someone says, "Oh, spoiler." So I always just read the opening scene, and I tend to write a fairly sort of short, sharp, hopefully intriguing opening scene to all my books anyway. So it makes it nice and easy. So this is the opening of For Our Sins. January the 8th, 1983, Saturday. And I checked that, it was a Saturday. Maybe what we can do on the internet these days. He can still feel the heat of the priest's breath on his face, smell the stink of whiskey, hear the harshly whispered words echo in his head. Stay there and don't make a sound. You know what will happen if you do. It's dark here in the closet, warm as he is surrounded by the cassocks so recently removed by the other altar boys. He still wears his, knows it will be worse for him if he takes it off before he's told to. It will be worse for him whatever he does. The interruption feels like a small blessing, but soon enough the destruction will be done. The special ministrations begin. God's love, visited through him. That's what Father O'Connell says. And isn't he God's voice? What he says, what he does, can't be wrong. A priest cannot sin, can he? Footsteps on the stone floor, and he shrinks back into the closet, wraps the cassocks around himself, breath stopped, eyes squeezed tight. He does not want him to come back, even as he knows it is a sin to refuse God's grace. A noise of the closet door being yanked open. He can only hold still as a growing warmth spreads from his crotch and down his leg. Fear smells like piss. An eternity passes as he waits for the hand to reach in and grab him, and then the closet door slams. He trembles with relief as he hears new noises, the clink and thud of silver against silver, another crash, the familiar sound of the vestry door as it slams shut. And then a silence falls so total he wonders if he has gone deaf. Only his heart and the soft bubbling of snot from his nose reassure him that he is not. How long does he wait there, unable to move? An hour? 5 minutes? He cannot say. And then another sound, low like the sad keening of an injured beast. It rises and falls until he can't know whether it is real or his imagination. He reaches for the door, black in front of him. Father O'Connell had latched it closed, but now it swings open to his touch. Slowly, wincing at the dampness of his trousers, he steps out of the closet. Across the small vestry, the door to the outside hangs ajar. The censer, chalice and candlesticks are gone from where they had been left to him to polish for Sunday Mass. Chairs lie on the floor, hymnals scattered and ripped. The priest is nowhere to be seen. He should flee, he knows. run all the way home, but he knows too the hell that waits those who disobey God's will. And who knows God's will better than a priest? Slowly, reluctantly, he walks a squelching path to the other door and the nave beyond. Father? His voice trembles and squeaks. He knows it will annoy the priest, but there is no answer from the gloom. No light from the dirty, stained glass windows. Only fat candles on the altar to cast any illumination. Father? He takes the 2 stone steps down, passes the pews and into the aisle. A nod of the head, the instinctive sign of the cross as he turns to face the altar. And that's when he sees. Father O'Connell lies on his front, arms wide as if he's genuflected. But he is still, so still. No sound of murmured prayer. A step towards the altar, uncertain. Then another, and a third. He cannot see the priest's face. His lank black hair splayed out around his head like a fan. Longer than it should be, it spreads past his shoulders, down the steps to the chancel. Not hair. Blood. He crouches by the still form, unsure what to do. There is so much blood. Is the priest dead? Before the thought is faded, a hand reaches out and grabs his wrist. That same hand that has touched him too many times before, administered God's grace, God's special grace. He tries to pull away, but the grip is too strong. The weight of it heavy as the priest pulls himself slowly around. Bloodshot eyes, crazy and wide with something that looks like fear. Flecks of bloody spittle over and cover his lips. Spot the rough stubble on his shin as the priest croaks in a voice laced with panic and despair and utter terror. Help me. Basically, in 1983, a Catholic priest was attacked in his church by robbers who stole the candlesticks and stuff and beat him unconscious, and he never recovered. And then we move forward 40 years and horrible things start happening, which is kind of how crime fiction works.
It's strange when a happy thing started happening.
Yeah, I can't think of any. When you get cozy crime,
Yeah.
well, happy things happening. But yeah, the inspiration for this, because I've got getting to book 13, I can't. The ideas come from all sorts of weird places for all of these books, and it's usually a kind of a collision of 2 different ideas. And I read an article about disused churches, not just in Edinburgh, all over Scotland, that were being basically deconsecrated and sold and turned into community centres or whatever, but most of them have just been turned into flats or knocked down and flats built on the land. And much the same time there was a thing in the there was all that stuff going on about the teacher at the private school down in Edinburgh who had abused a lot of boys, Nicky Campbell and I have to say I was never abused. I went to a private school down in England, which is why I don't sound like a fifer particularly. And one of the teachers there, many years after I'd left, it came out that he'd been systematically sexually abusing some of the boys. The weird thing is he was the favourite teacher. Everyone loved him. And everyone wanted to be sort of in his gang, as it were. But I had absolutely no idea. I was there. I was from age 7 till 12. I hadn't know what was going on. It wasn't happening to me. There was no way I would know what was going on. And I was thinking about that and how it's also sadly very prevalent in the Catholic Church, the abuse of altar boys. And these 2 thoughts kind of collided. And that was the seed of that book. So the next chapter, which is current day, we see Detective Sergeant Jamie Harrison attending a dead body found in a disused church. And they only don't know that he's been there's something suspicious about his death, because the church has partially collapsed and it's fallen on his head and crushed it, so they can't see the mark that's where he's been branded. But they find out fairly soon that something's up, because then another body turns up in another church. It wouldn't be a good crime to have lots and lots of dead bodies turned. As I say, we're going to do this quite informally, so if anyone does have any questions or wants to make any observations or anything, just stick your hand up and ask.
Go on. Do you feel any pressure, like you say, you've been doing it for like so many books for 10 years, and you see somebody like George R.R. Martin, he gets a lot of pressure on life for not finishing one book in 10 years, it's took him to do it.
I would love to be able to publish just one book every 10 years, but I've got a mortgage to pay. Cows to feed. I also, I get very easily bored anyway, right? Because I would write even if I wasn't published, and I have been writing. My first published story was 1993, so 30 years ago, and I didn't get anything else published for 20 years after that. But I was still writing the whole time because I just love writing and making up stories and puzzling out, get these stupid little ideas that collide, so I would do it anyway, but now that I've got contracts and I've got publishers and they want basically series fiction, you've got to bring the book out to me. I did have a year off after book 12 because I was just knackered, but you've got to keep that momentum going, otherwise people forget who you are. But if I could get away with it, George R.R. The thing is, he'd been writing for years. The first Game of Thrones book was published long before television got interested. And the series had basically died down. He wasn't writing it because no one was reading it. And then it suddenly got picked up by the television. And I think he'd kind of struggled a bit to catch up with things because he'd almost forgotten about what moved on to other things. And suddenly he had to finish the series. So,
a slightly unusual publishing journey similarly. Was your first?
One of the things, you might have noticed from that bit that I read at the start, which is kind of Catholic priest and spooky things going on, that there's a little bit of what one might call the other world in my books, and a lot of the crimes that Tony McClane investigates have a kind of possible supernatural twist to them. And I always wanted to do that. That's the kind of thing I like the sort of stories that I like to read, those kind of ghosty stories and stuff. So when I first wrote a crime fiction, the first one, Natural Causes, and was first in the series, I introduced this detective who didn't really believe in the supernatural, but could see weird things going on, or was his logical deductive mind would say, well, if nothing else works, then the reason has to be this. In Natural Causes, and I think I can probably give away spoilers for Natural Causes now because it's been out for a while. The central basic idea of that is that at the end of the Second World War, a bunch of mates got together, performed this ritual that would give them, if not quite eternal life, then great longevity. And the ritual involved murdering a young woman and leaving her walled up in the basement. And it trapped a demon in her body, and whilst the demon was trapped, they would carry on living, they wouldn't die. And then, fast forward 60 years, the building's being demolished or redeveloped or something, and this hidden room in the basement is disturbed, and the demon escapes and starts to get its revenge. And it does this by jumping from person to person. And it's, by the time you've got to the end of it, it's very obvious. It's like there's lots of crime going on and weird murders and stuff, but they have to accept that there is this demon jumping from person to person and using violence as the way of doing it. And it was very well received by a lot of people. That book was shortlisted for the Crime Writers Association, David Dagger, and it went out to lots and lots of publishers, and it came back universally, all of them saying there is no market for crime, supernatural crime, basically. You can't have all these, you can't have a police procedure where police are investigating and it's all logic and stuff, and they find out it was a demon. People won't accept that. So I couldn't get a publisher for it. And I ended up self-publishing it on Kindle. And I actually that was 2011, February 2011, so about this time, 12 years ago. I put that up on Kindle. By the end of 2012, sorry, getting my years. That's the only problem with it in 10 years. All of the stuff, my mind is all over the place. But yeah, 2012, February 2012. By the October 2012, 350,000 people decided they'd like to read in crime with a supernatural twist in it. And Penguin had come along and made me a substantial offer to properly publish it, or make them available in bookshops. So that's kind of how I got published. But because I was writing these crime novels with a supernatural twist, publishing is very small C conservative. They don't like to do weird mashups like that. And part of the reason is, if you read the blurb on the inside cover of this, it sort of says, I think that the closest we get, so there's a killer stalking the streets of Edinburgh. Is it time for McLean to get back to doing what he does best? It's spooky things, but it doesn't mention the supernatural or anything. None of my books do, because if it did, these would get shelved in the horror section, which is this tiny little section compared to the crime section, because people don't read horror. And most of the horror writers have switched to writing crime now, because unless your name is Stephen King or Dean Koontz, and I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of horror myself. I quite like a sort of psychological horror, ghost story, and sort of thing. I can't be doing with slasher horror and Bruce. A weird thing to say, having actually anyone's read Natural Causes will know that it's quite gruesome. But my books get less and less gory, and I don't dwell on the gore as much as I used to. I think the first ones I was trying to. I was basically trying to emulate Stuart Bride, which is never good on today. But he was his old friend of mine. He got the intellectual translations. Yes, I had a slightly unusual path of publication.
I wonder as well, there's a slightly unusual origin for Tony McLean as well. Like I read, is it true that he started off as a spec character for 2000 AD?
He did indeed. I mean, this goes back to when I first met Stuart in, we both lived in Aberdeen in the early 90s, and both loved comics. Stuart's quite a good artist as well as writer. Anyone who's had a book signed by him, quite often does some very ornate cartoons and things, and we were introduced by a mutual friend and collaborated on various comics. But at the time I was trying to break into comics. I'd had one story published by 2000, and I wrote on spec a ghost story based in Edinburgh, and it had a policeman who by some never explained reason, he could see this ghost that was walking around the city causing pain, and nobody else could see it. And that was Tony McLean. Can you hear all right? Sorry. Do you want to come sit?
Yeah.
The problem is because we've got the fan going, and also I'm not very good at projecting. I'm not an actor. I'll try and speak up a bit.
Maybe it's because that's in my
Sorry, I wish there was a way I could shut it off.
Yeah, so as I say, Stuart and I collaborated on comics, and I'd written this ghost story with Tony McLean in it, and then Stuart and I did a story which was basically a piss take of Mr. Ben. Again, it was based in Edinburgh. Mr. Ben lived in, I don't know where Mr. Ben lives in the cartoons, but we made him live in Edinburgh. And the devil was also living in Edinburgh, and kidnapping children from the Steves, children who'd be overlooked, and there was all sorts of horrible things going on. Very student humour, and I used Tony McLean in that as well, because I needed a policeman and I'm really lazy, so I just thought I'd use this character again. And then I moved down to Edinburgh. My partner was doing a PhD at Dick Beck, so we lived in Roslin for 5 years, and I was doing various temp jobs around the place and writing. And I wrote a couple of really, really bad sort of urban fantasy, contemporary urban fantasy novels. I was determined, because I loved Good Omens, Terry Pratchett and Good Omens, which is effectively the second coming of Christ, the young boy. And I was going to do it the other way around. I was inspired by that to try and write. I was quite young and naive and not a very good writer then. I thought I could write a better book than Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I still had that self-confidence. But I used Tony McLean in that as well, because I needed a policeman. And it kind of fed into it, because I needed a policeman who could see the undercovers, the supernatural stuff going on when nobody else would admit that it existed. And he just kind of stuck with me. Whenever I was writing a story and I needed a policeman, I'd use him. And then eventually, it was I think it was 2004 when Stuart's first book, Cold Granite, was published. And he phoned me up, and I was writing fantasy books at the time. And he said, stop writing this fantasy, crime fiction is the thing to do. And that's what got me trying to write a straight crime novel, at least procedural, thriller, whatever. But I couldn't quite break that, because I still wanted to use Tony McLean. I was determined to get him into a story that got published. And his unique selling point was that he lived in a world where these ghosts and ghouls and demons and things were perhaps real. And that's kind of where he came from. But the other thing about that, of course, is that I've been writing the character in one way or another for about more than 30 years, which is quite helpful in some ways, because I'm writing book 13, I'm writing book 14 now, book 13 is out, and it would be really quite difficult if I didn't know the character so well, to come up with new things for him to do. So it's quite good that I've known him for that long.
This series as well is, like it really does get into the character as well. There's stuff that's going on in his personal life and stuff. And by the time that we're here on book 13, he's coming back out of retirement. So as writing from this new sort of retired perspective, does that present its own challenges, or has it just been a natural?
It was quite fun actually, because I was trying to think of part of the reason why he handed in his notice at the end of the previous book was because I knew I was going to have 2 years off. Well, I was going to have a year off, so it'd be 2 years until this one came out, from when that one came out. By the time I'd finished writing the books, the one before this, I was absolutely knackered. I mean, I kind of channeled a lot of myself into Tony McLean. So he was knackered and fed up and whatever, and I was knackered and fed up. And I just finished a contract. That was the 12th book in the series, was the last book in my current contract. And then, of course, my lovely publisher came along and said, "You're going to write us some more, aren't you, Jeff?" Yes, Alex, you insist. But I insisted that I have a year off. And I thought I could be really, really cruel to my readers and have it so that he hands in his notice right at the end. And I did, and inevitably I got loads of people asking me, after that one came out. Is that it? Is that the last book? Well, some people just assumed it was the last book and there weren't going to be any more. So hopefully they're pleasantly surprised. Yeah, so then I had to think, well, what am I going to do next? And I did quite what I really wanted to do. What I pitched to my publisher was to do a couple of Janie Harrison books. She first came in, I think it's Written in Bones. Tony McLean's, she's just a new police constable, fresh out of training college and at a crime scene, but he needs someone to help him go and interview a small boy. She's the only woman, so she grabs her and takes her. And that's the start of a mentorship, as it were. So she's come a long way over all those books. And I've started using her as a point of view character. So the initial books were all entirely from Tony's McLean's point of view. And then recently I started doing a few scenes from her point of view as a counterpoint, just to break up the narrative a bit. And also, he's missing half of Robert Litt's, so I needed another character. And I just think it'd be great fun actually to write a couple of Janie Harrison books on her own. And I pitched that to my editor, and he looked at me like I've got two heads. People come here for Inspector McLean, they want Inspector McLean. You can't do that, they won't sell. So I had to bring him back in one way or another. And I thought I could keep him retired for the whole book, just coming in and helping out. I didn't want to just bring him into the cold case unit, like Grumpy Bob's gone to work in the cold case unit, Judy's working in the cold case. I didn't want him to do that. So I thought, well, no, we'll have him retired to start with, and he's got plenty to do to keep himself busy. Except it's not enough for him. He's had a bit of a rest, but he's itching to get back into the detective world, which is why he's meeting up with the reporter, Joe Dalgleish, every so often for a cup of coffee and blather about what's going on. And Grumpy Bob as well, is meeting him up once a week sort of thing. So it's kind of, you can see him itching really to get back into it, but he also doesn't want to because he feels an obligation to look after Emma, who's recovering from a stroke. So it isn't really until Emma basically says, look, you're not happy stuck here at home killing the roses by not knowing how to prune them properly. Away you go back to work, I'm fine. But he takes, he accepts that, and so by the end of the book, yes, he's, without giving too much away, he's got his warrant card back. Which is just as well, because I've got 2 more books after that one to write under my current contract, and who knows what will happen after that.
So, would you ever meet anybody in real life and say, I could put that in my book or something like that?
All the time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. After we had the launch of this in Waterstones in Edinburgh, Princess Street, last Thursday when it came out, and then afterwards, my godmother, sainted godmother Janie Harrison, whose name was stolen, who uses the books, took me and my partner out for a meal. And we were chatting away about this. I can't remember what it was we were talking about now, which is bad because I should have written it straight down in my notebook. Because they were telling me a story about something that had happened to one or other of them, and I just said that's turning up in the next book, and it does quite often. Yeah. I mean, sometimes like this time, we're having a nice meal, and I maybe had too many glasses of wine, and so I forgot to get my notebook out and write it down, and I've lost it now. I do pick up stories and snippets of conversation, or you see someone in a situation, and you think, what's their story? And you don't need to know what their story is. Someone sitting in a park, eating a sandwich and sharing their sandwich with the birds and something. You just make a story out about them. They're all over the place. And the collision of ideas as well. So, which one was Bury Them Deep, which I think was book 10 in the series, which that was inspired by two conversations on Twitter that collided. Anna Mazzola is a lovely lady who writes historical crime fiction, very gothic stuff, was talking about Sawney Bean. I'd not thought about Sawney Bean for a while, but I was reminded of Sawney Bean. And then Sarah Penbrook, bless her, was talking about doggers. And if you don't know what doggers are, don't look it up. They're not people who take their dogs for walks, though I suppose they could be. And there were two completely separate conversations, but they collided. I thought, Sawney Bean cannibals in the woods, doggers. And that was, that's me. My brain just leapt on that. And then I had to sort of take that little idea and worry away at it and say, well, what can we do? How can we do this? And how can we work this out? And then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Every book is a series of what-if questions. And the corollary of that is that I don't do much planning before I start writing. I'll have something like that opening scene. I like to get a good opening scene. And actually, I did cheat a bit because I wrote the next scene, so the next chapter in that book first, which is where Jane Harrison discovers or goes to the crime scene where there's a dead body in a disused church, and it all gets a bit messy. But that was kind of it was a good way of opening the book, and then I just sort of start asking myself questions like, there's a body in the church. Why is it there? Who is it? Where do they live? What were their last steps? And you start asking the same sort of questions that the police would ask in that sort of situation, and just build the story from there. It's quite terrifying, and there's usually a bit. I'll probably be about 60 or 70,000 words in, and it's suddenly, oh right, yeah, that's how it works. And it's such a feeling of relief every time I get to that point. It might be sometimes it can be another 50, 60,000 words before I finish. But suddenly I realised what all these little ideas have been leading me towards.
You probably get this all the time. Who would you like to employ him on TV or a film or anything?
I don't really know. The big problem is I run a farm. I write these books. I've written 13 of these books, 3 Con Fairchild books, and 5 of my fantasy books. And I've got another book coming out in September, which is a completely different standalone story. And I don't get much time to watch television, so I don't really know any actors. And I think of someone and I think, oh no, they're either too old or they're too dead. So I'm always open to suggestions. But the interesting thing, and I say this fully in the knowledge that possibly nothing, in all probability, nothing will come of it. But my older brother Peter is a playwright. He was the first writer in residence at the Shakespeare's Globe when it was rebuilt in England. So I sometimes joke that he was the first writer in residence after William Shakespeare. And he does actually write verse plays. He's had quite a few quite successful plays. He's a bit weird. But he's very arty and very sort of highbrow literature. So doesn't sneer at my books. He's been very proud of my success and everything, but it's not. He's always thought it's not really his thing. But for some reasons unknown, just before Christmas, he picked up a copy of Natural Causes and read it and absolutely loved it, and now wants to turn it into a play. So he's trying to persuade a Scottish theatre somewhere, an Edinburgh theatre basically, to take on a play based on natural causes. But though it's quite interesting, he sent me a synopsis of what he was doing and what he'd had to change to make it work as a play. It's quite fascinating. And I could imagine some writers looking at this and saying, you can't do that. You can't take that character and do this and that. And I was looking and thinking, oh, that's a really good idea, actually. Why didn't I think of that? So we've been doing a little bit of back and forth and trying to talk to a few theatres. Unfortunately, there's very little money to put on new productions these days. So it might not come to anything. But again, I have no idea what actor would play. I mean, I'm open. I mean, I can ask you who you think will play McLean, but chances are I won't know who at all.
When you look at like Jack Reacher, and Tom Cruise played him, he's supposed to be nothing like him in the book.
I think that the thing about the Reacher books, I mean, obviously the reason why Tom Cruise played him was because Tom Cruise wanted to play him, and he bought the rights, the movie rights. Those were quite enjoyable movies, actually. The second one was a bit... the second one felt like an extended edition of NCIS, and the first one was quite good. I enjoyed them because I'd not read any of the Reacher books at that point, so I didn't get that cognitive dissonance. I'm thinking, Reacher's meant to be the size of a barn. Here's this tiny little guy. I mean, obviously the new guy that got doing is brilliant. Those are quite fun. But I don't think it really matters. I think that you have to sort of realise once you've written a book, if it's going to be adapted to television or film or the stage, it's going to be a completely new thing. And it might be inspired by, it might use the same storyline, but because they're different mediums, they need different things. But Natural Causes has got a huge cast list. You couldn't have that many people in stage plays. Immediately you've got a constraint there. You've got to bring people down. It could also be very confusing if you've got too many people just coming on for a couple of lines and then going, well, who are they? What's going on? So you have to construct a story completely differently.
I think the danger too is people have their own personal image. And if you put someone on television, because I was disappointed with the Peter James cast. I can't remember what it's called. But I read all the Peter James books. No, I mean the
play?
The people who were... The guy who's playing Inspector Graves. I can't remember. He's quite well known. But Johnson.
Yeah.
He was a big disappointment. So was the police inspector. And that's...
Quite often, though, they get the actor, because either it's the actor's production company that's making it, or they know that actor's going to draw in a big audience. So that's another consideration, because it costs a lot of money to make television, so you've got to hope that enough people will watch it and advertisers will buy it.
Yeah, because it was the same with Rebus, wasn't it? Was it Hannah? John Hannah played the original Rebus, but he was too polished.
Yeah, and
too young, and then they put Ken Stott in it, and suddenly...
The Ken Stott was very good as an older Rebus, but wasn't so good for playing with the younger Rebus. I'd be interested to see what they do with this new reimagining of it. I don't know when that's coming out, sometime soon. Slightly irritating though, because it means there's a contemporary police crime series in Edinburgh going to be on the telly soon, so no one's going to buy an ice in it.
Because I remember reading, I'm not going to throw Twitter up. I remember during COVID, and there was a whole period of time of police brutality cases were coming out, and lots of different negative aspects of it, and you seemed to become quite disillusioned at that point of sort of bigging up the law enforcement when the world was showing a different side to it. So did that weariness come out in your character?
I think that did come out, and that was another reason behind the ending of All That Lives with McLean chucking it all in, because he got fed up with the politics of it, and I do address that. I mean, there's a corrupt senior officer in this one who gets his comeuppance. But yeah, it was the Sarah Everard visuals that was the worst bit. You saw how badly the Met Police. And it does. I mean, other police forces are available, but the Met does seem to have a monopoly on the really bad stories, PR stories. But that was just atrocious. And you look at it and you think, well, why am I writing stories where the police are the heroes? Why am I doing that propaganda for them? And I think it's not quite as simplistic as that, because we don't really. I've had corrupt and ineffective and lazy officers in all of my books, pretty much. And there's always this idea that a lot of them are corrupt and evil. Some of them, but the ones that the heroes of the book are just doing the best that they can with what they've got. Because I have met quite a lot of police officers, and they, they're as irritated by the bad so-called bad as because it's a difficult and dangerous job that they do. And every time there's one of these, Met officers whose nickname amongst all his mates is the rapist, or whatever the guy was called. It makes their the straight cops life more difficult because they lose public confidence.
I must admit, when I read the last book, I said to you, didn't I think that's him done now. I think that's McLean retired, and that was halfway through the book. I got the feeling that.
I have to watch myself, because as I say, I was absolutely exhausted when I finished that book. It does show in the writing a bit. McLean is just so downtrodden, weary, and just worn out by that.
It did come through.
And I try not to do that too much, because it's not much fun to read.
Well, I buy them and pass them on to him. That's myself. And didn't I say that? Didn't I say that to you? I think that's him retired, he's done.
Well,
and then he came up with the story that had been on Twitter and gave me the reason. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, he's when he retired, partly he was just fed up. And also, he almost died, and he was badly injured, and he just had enough. But the other reason that he did it is because he was protecting the rest of his team. If he put himself up as a scapegoat, then everybody else would keep their jobs. Because what happened, obviously, it wasn't just him he found out or Jenny Ashton actually found out who was behind it all and what was going on. But the entire charitable sector in Edinburgh collapsed because of his investigations, and obviously he wasn't terribly popular. So he needed to be a scapegoat. There needed to be a scapegoat for politicians, otherwise who knows what would go on.
I was going to say, if you wanted to pick up with that Jenny Hammond Harrison, that's what J.D. Kirk's done.
Yeah, but he also self-publishes most of his stuff as well, doesn't he?
Well, I read them all during lockdown. Well, during the last part of lockdown, I had been quite ill and said to the guy in the library, I can't be bothered with it. Because I do go to read a book as well. And he said, try this one. And I read 14 minutes in about 6 weeks. But he's
almost
now,
as quickly as he writes them.
he did comics before as well.
He's amazing. I don't know how he writes that. I mean, I thought I wrote quickly, but Barry's is real. It's just amazing. He's a machine.
I just had an email from him saying that he'd had to go to America because his son was involved in a hit and run accident. It cost him about $40,000. Dollars changed into pounds, 40,000 for medical bills. He'd only been there 1 day. Anyhow, it's all about reaching.
Not planning on going to America.
Have you completely shelved Madame Rose?
No, she's around. She comes and goes. The problem is, she's a very popular character, so I feel that I have to bring her on in most of the books. But if I wanted to actually structure a book around her properly, it's quite difficult.
It's nice when she makes it. I actually was really annoyed when she appeared because I thought, what is this about? And then when she disappeared, I was really
It took me really by surprise because she was never meant to be more than just a character in one book, just very briefly. She's an antiquarian bookseller and deals in occult curios, and I needed in the Book of Souls because Tony McLean's fiance, 10 years before any of the books happened, was abducted and killed by a serial killer who was also an antiquarian bookseller. So McLean needed some information about antiquarian books, so I thought, right, I need a slightly weird, eccentric antiquarian bookseller. Where can they have their shop? Down on Leith Walk, I've seen some of these weird buildings where the shops at the front and then the stairs go up to the house at the back. So we put it there. And actually, I described the shop entrance when going in and up the stairs. And it wasn't actually until we went into the reception area that was the first time even I met him. And it was just a silly kind of throwaway thing about being a man in drag, trans woman, whatever you want. That was when did I write that? 2007, so a long time ago, long before any of this character trans coming go. And it was almost a throwaway line. I just put that in to make McLean uncomfortable because I wasn't quite sure how to deal with this person. And got the information needed. And ended it. But no, she wouldn't leave it alone. She wouldn't walk off. She kept on coming back on stage. No, I need more. And she just grew and grew as a character. And I think she really came into her own. I think it was Prayer for the Dead. Prayer for the Dead. So that's the one she's got the. So this is me. I can't remember it. That's the one that she's got the property developers in it. Who are trying to burn her out of the house, and that was when I kind of brought it. Thought, right, she's a character who's staying. But I was getting so many emails from people, and I do events like this, and people would ask me about Madame Rose and what was the inspiration for it. And she just literally came out of nowhere. And she wasn't meant to be for more than one book, and now I can't get rid of her. I'm not going to do a Madame Rose origin story book though. Someone wants me to do a Madame Rose series. I couldn't do that. I think it would ruin the mystique of the character.
It was great to see her pop up in the other novels. In Fairchild.
Yes. Well, that was the thing when because I wrote eight of the books were published by Penguin, and then my original editor left Penguin, and I didn't really get on and really fit in after he'd gone. So I moved publisher, and the idea with the new publisher was to carry on doing the McLean books, yes, but to do something new. And I pitched them a few ideas, one of which was the Con Fairchild books, and that's how I started writing there. And I was just halfway through the first draft of the first book, and one of the assistant editors there said, "Is Con ever going to be Tony McLean?" And at that point, I hadn't even considered the idea that they lived in the same worlds. It was just a different book, different series, different world, whatever. But I thought, there's no reason why they couldn't. Except that if they did, depending on whose book it was, I would have to, when they met, if it was Con Fairchild, I was writing from Con's point of view and she met Tony McLean, she would see this character and she would note that he was however tall and the colour of his hair maybe and stuff. And I don't really go in for physical descriptions of my characters. So I didn't really want Con to meet Tony, so I could avoid having to describe Tony. I haven't described Con all that much. There's a couple of physical features, like she's got red hair, because that's a plot point. That's an important thing that you need to know. But mostly I those books are all written from her, single first person point of view. So she's never going to remark about how she looks unless she's got a black eye or something. So yeah. So but putting the two, having the two series work in the same world was a bit of an accident, but was quite useful because it meant that then when I was writing What Will Burn, I could bring Connor's sister into that, into quite useful parts, because she had a big role in that, which was quite fun to write.
Yeah, I was interested there when you were mentioning about these old buildings on the wall with the stairs up inside and that. And of course you mentioned earlier how occasionally you draw sort of snippets of conversation and they end up in your books. So of course, because you've got a fairly local setting with Edinburgh, is it the same with sort of like locations, buildings? Do you walk past a disused church?
Well, do I'm not as much as I should. I'm terrible at research. I do no police research at all, as little as I possibly can. And I use Google Maps a lot. And I came slightly unstuck with the third Confair trial, because quite a lot of that happens in Edinburgh. And I wanted some of it to happen in the Catholic Cathedral, the top of the hill. And I just wanted an image of it, so I could just describe, because I've been past it hundreds of times. Every time you go to John Lewis's, you walk past it. But I couldn't remember what it looked like because you don't really pay attention. It's John Lewis's. When you go to Mr. James' portion, there's that huge, great big metal dogtail. There's an excellent line. I had probably to find it. Tony McLean's not a big fan of that at all. And there's a point in there where he does describe it as, in no uncertain terms, as not a warm puppet. But anyway, back to the Catholic Cathedral. So I went into Google Street View, and I was panning up Beathorpe, looking at the building sites, just to remind myself what things look like. So I can just use little snippets of description. Got to the top, pan round, just see the side of the cathedral. Next thing, there's a bloody great big delivery van parked in pan round, gone. So I had to I ended up using a different venue for that setting. That's how I tend to, rather than jumping on a train and going down to Edinburgh and taking photographs, where was it now? Just use something else. 1995 to 2000 was after I was doing my PhD. So that's, and I was a postgrad student in 1991, and went back up to Aberdeen. So those are my memories of Edinburgh. My most obvious memories of Edinburgh. And it really does show in the books. The first two books I wrote whilst I was living in Wales. And that was before we had Google Maps as well. I only had dial-up internet while I was living in Wales. So I bought a couple of Ordnance Survey land ranger maps and stuck them on the wall. And I used to just go around the city in my head. And there was all the places where I'd lived in Roslin, and used to go to Lonehead and that sort of area. So I knew that area well. So there's quite a lot of crime happening in that area. I worked in the grass market, so it's a few nasty things happening in the grass market. I worked in the call centre just off Leith Walk, which is why Leith Walk and Leith started to feature quite a lot in the books. And I was just using my memories. And it's a bad habit to get into because, well, I think it was the fourth book, Dead Man's Bones. So I had actually moved back up to Scotland by the time I wrote that. And I was remembering Rosslyn Lee psychiatric hospital, just near Roslyn, and how close it is to Roslyn Glen. And so I got this opening scene of that book. You've got someone breaking out of the supposedly disused and derelict psychiatric hospital, running across snowy fields, plunging over the cliff into Rosalind Glen, and in terror as he's being chased by his own inner demons or something. And I've done that all from my memory, having bicycled around the place, walked the dogs around there, and it's all completely wrong. So I did go back there, and if you did that, if you went from Rosalind Lee Hospital across the fields, you're going to get across the old disused railway first, and then actually it's quite a gentle slope down to the old Winchell's factory, rather than the cliffs, which are further downstream. so it wouldn't work. It doesn't matter because it's the atmosphere that we're building, rather than absolute truth. But I do like to try and I do use the city, and the city is quite an important part of the books. But it's a slightly warped version of Edinburgh, and it's changed so much since we moved down to Wales. My partner got her PhD and moved down to Wales for her work in 2000. It's unrecognised 25 years later. Someone's got a dog tail.
So, like, for instance, like you'll say it's based in Edinburgh. Say somebody like Anne Cleese bases this, or the Orkneys and Shetlands and stuff like that. You think there's not much crime up there, but it seems to be a murder in every books has got.
Well, it's like Midsummer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why would anyone buy a house in Midsummer? But that's what we do in crime fiction. I mean, the first book, Natural Causes, God only knows how many miles. But I remember having written it, I looked up the crime statistics, the most recent crime statistics for the whole Lowland Borders region as it was then. And in the year that I'd written that book, there had been 4 murders, and they'd solved 5, because they'd solved all 4 murders, and there was one from the previous year that carried over. And they were all kind of domestic disputes gone too far, sort of things. There's none of the sort of weird stuff that we write as crime fiction authors. But we're bigging things up, we're exaggerating stuff for entertainment. I do sometimes get asked, because I'm a country boy, I'm a farmer, and I live just across the water there. And I get asked, why don't you write rural crime? And I say, well, most rural crime is setting fire to barns full of straw and sheep rustling. It's not that exciting. But either that, or you go into there's old secrets buried which come to life, and it's all a bit cliched sometimes, I think. Having said which, my next book, which, as I say, is a standalone, it's not really crime fiction at all, called Broken Ghosts, comes out in September, and it's a story inspired by the time that I spent living and working in Wales as an agricultural research consultant. And it's about a young girl whose parents died. Her parents died. She lives in Cooper. I'm mining my own experience here. She lives in Cooper, but her parents die in a horrible house fire, and she gets sent down to Wales to live with her aunt, an eccentric aunt and uncle. And she uncovers a secret which has been buried in this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere in Wales. So that's a bit digging into that cliche kind of stuff. I had a really hard time pitching it to my publishers because I don't know really. It's not really a ghost story. It's certainly not crime fiction. It's not really a coming of age story or anything like that. So when you guys get it in September, I have no idea what shelf you're going to put.
Maybe one on each.
Absolutely, just spread it around.
That sounds lovely. And on the subject of, like your new books, just to sort of round things off and things, is there any sort of tidbits you can tell us about what might be happening to Tony McLean next, since we've got another couple?
Well, I had hopes before this book came out to have got the first draft of the next book written, but I haven't, for various reasons. Partly, my existing publisher picked up this Welsh book, so I had to, every get inside and get all the editing done on that. Partly out of shingles at the beginning of January, and knocked me out for the best part of the month. I'm better now, and I'm not contagious, but it was really not very nice. So I'm still only about halfway through, and it's the single. I'm sometimes a bit, as I say, I'm rubbish at plotting, doing detailed plots. I just start writing with the slimmest of ideas, and two things that have inspired it. One, I don't know if you've seen, I can't even remember the guy's name, but there's this billionaire, American .com billionaire, who's obsessed with living forever. And he's on this weird dietary regime, where he basically, I think, some weird therapy that he uses, which is he gets the blood serum from his son. And it is that creepy. And is trying to do all this to keep his physical age down to about 45 or something, so he can surf the age wave until such time as all the surgeries and things that have happened, all the therapies that help him live forever. And but there's photographs of this guy, and he looks really haggard and weird. He's got this obsessive daily regime that he follows, and eats weird foods and does weird exercises, and I kind of thought, well, I've got to write about something like that. And I was thinking, because my books are a little bit suits, there's this supernatural stuff going on. I'm thinking I've had a demon in the first book, jumping from body to body. The second book is about, again, a demonic possessed book that possesses the souls of whoever reads it and turns them into serial killers, or maybe that's not what's happening. And the third one was supposed to be, the key for that was it was a single line written in my notebook, channeling the spirit of Albert Pierpont. And Albert Pierpont being the last hangman, British hangman. But I had this idea of an executioner, a hangman. After he's died, his spirit comes back and possesses people. That was the idea behind that one. And then we have a recurring villain character, Mrs. Cypher, otherwise known as Jane Louise D, or Louise Cypher, if you want to really go there, Lucifer the devil. So I've got all these evil characters, and we had in one of the books we had Syrian Middle East refugees brought a jinn over with them. So I thought, I haven't done werewolves yet, I can't do werewolves. I haven't done vampires yet, so I was thinking vampires. And then I was thinking, you've got this billionaire who is basically taking blood transfusions from his teenage son. It writes itself. So, I can't really give any more away because I don't actually know how it's going to end, but it's vampires this time.
Yeah, that sounds intriguing, and I'm sure that we'll all be waiting to see how that pans out.
Well, it's due out about this time next year, so I need to get a move on. This is the treadmill that my publishers have me on. It's brilliant though, because as I said, I had the Clark's Future Shock published in 2000 AD comic in 1993. So last December was the 30th anniversary of that. It took me another 20 years to get published, and I'm really loving that I can write these books and people reading them. You guys can come out on cold February nights to listen to me whittering on about vampires and demons and nonsense. And it's what I always wanted to do, right? Writing books. And that's something my younger brother, who lives on the farm with me, my older brother is a playwright, lives down in Brighton, but my younger brother lives on the farm. And every so often when something's, it's really hard, and stories aren't working, whatever, and I bump into him and I take out walking the dogs and I start moaning at him about how life's miserable and I can't do it anymore. He says, well, you've only got what you always wanted. He's absolutely right.
Here we are then. And yeah, well, I think that we're all very glad that we came out and spoke about your evening.
Well, thank you
to hear
for
all
coming.
about it.
I think it's quite nice actually when there's not too many people and you can just have questions. People who don't like asking questions don't feel too awkward asking questions. There's not that many people here. It's not as bad. I did an event years ago in Borstons and St Andrews, and 3 people turned up, and I started reading a passage from the beginning of the book, and I was halfway through the passage, and one of the people, a middle-aged lady, got up. So I collared and ran out. And I hadn't even got to the glory bit. And apparently she had a reputation for doing that sort of thing. But St Andrews is a bit like that. Lovely town, but the people are a bit
Eccentric. Well, I hope that everyone will, like, join you then. Yep, these books are for sale downstairs.
I have a different solution for my contracts to the one that I put in.
Makes sense.
Well, there we are. And anybody that brought a cheque, there was no point in doing.
I don't think anyone has checks yet.
Every so often I get sent a check. It's really annoying because I bank online. It's really
You've got to go all the way into town to.
You've got to find a van.
My bank doesn't have any branches. It's
Oh, really?
an online bank, Starling Bank. I mean, they're great, but I have to post the check down. It's like, it's usually the livestock market, even though they've got my bank details, they send me a check. I've sent 2 dozen cows to markets. It's quite a substantial check, and I have to post it to them. So of course, I then have to pay for the recorded delivery because I'm not losing that job. That's the farm's earnings. Will I go down to
Yes, yeah, I'll show you where you are.